Hello and welcome to Banya Chat. How are we all doing today? My name is Thomas Barnes and I am here. I have the pleasure to be here with Nyasha Gwatidzo. And Nyasha is the founder of Banya. So I am very fortunate to be here. Nyasha is an amazing individual. She not only is the founder of Banya, but she's involved in many other things, including the Banya Trust, which she set up, and many charities, including Walk for Difference, which helps children in Zimbabwe. Hey. Hello, Nyasha.
Hi, Thomas. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very, very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for being here. It's such an honor to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so today's today's topic for Banya Chat is why do children come into care?
Mm.
But first, I'd like to ask, um, Nyasha, you've been here from the very beginning. I mean, you are the beginning of Banya.
Mm.
How many children have Banya cared for?
Oh, we've looked after over 7,000 children for the last 24 years. And in terms of looking after, this varies from 1 hour, which has been one of the shortest period we've looked after somebody, to 18 years, from when they're baby to 18 years old. And it's really such a rewarding work to do.
Mm. So you looked after a child for 1 hour to 18
Mm.
years.
Yes.
Wow.
Oh,
Only
yeah.
1 hour. So it is really from when you say 0 to 18, you really do mean 0 to 18.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, it's just so funny. That incident, there was some miscommunication with the parents. So someone else was supposed to have picked up, and the school phoned us and said we've got this child, and we all set to look after her. And I think that was about 12 years ago. That girl is now more, I'm sure she's more than 18. I think she was 6. Yes, so she must be 20 something now, and she's still in touch with the carer.
Right. So you looked after her for an hour and she's still in touch
With the carer.
with you 18 years later.
Yeah. Mhm.
Wow. It just shows the amazing partnership you build in such a short time with Banya.
Yes,
Wow.
definitely.
So like in all your years of Banya, you must have seen so many different cases and so many different varieties of families and uh, dysfunctional families, unfortunately, too.
Yes, we've seen a lot of children who come into care because of the family. I think really it's the foundation of the reasons why children come into care is that the families, for whatever reason, are not competent to look after their own children for whatever reasons. And dysfunctional families, as we are aware, 15% of our children come into care. But I think it's very linked to why the reason why they're dysfunctional leads into more children being in care. In that, because they're not functioning properly, they cause the abuse, the neglect, so that the children end up in care. So I think they're very interlinked. The reasons between not coping, not functioning, to the actual abusing. And in terms of dysfunctional families, as I said, this is a very, we tend to use very social work language, including dysfunctional and abuse and neglect. And people might say, what does that mean? What does dysfunctional mean? And this is really when a family setting is not managing for whatever reason, because they are incompetent, because one of them is that they were not parented themselves, so they don't know how to do it. They genuinely do not know how to parent a child. And some of them might be going through divorce, quite a horrendous divorce. Some of them might be going through domestic violence. Some of them might be going, some of them is single women, for example, trying to look after the children by themselves because they're coming from dysfunctional families themselves. They don't talk to their mother, they don't talk to their dad, they don't talk to their sisters because of all these family dynamics. And so they don't have the support which would normally expect from a family to have a support, because you can't bring up the children by yourself. You need a lot of support to bring up a child. And if you've got all these difficulties surrounding you, it makes you dysfunctional, so you can't look after your children. And most people are always talking about, oh, I don't really know. Some people even joke about, oh, I come from a dysfunctional family. But it's the depth of the way in which they're not functioning, which causes the local authority to say, for this reason, we are definitely going to take your children into the care system. And I think from dysfunctional, then I would like to talk a bit more about what happens when a family is not dysfunctional, it's not functioning properly. The major reason, we know 63% of children come into care because of abuse and neglect. And I think it's very fundamental because it's coming from this family setting or background, which is not working properly. So again, I'm always asked about, abuse. What is this all about? What does it mean for a child to be abused? What does it mean for a child to be neglected? And I'm not talking about the day-to-day, a parent shouting at a child, a day-to-day, a parent smacking. It's not allowed in fostering anyway to smack a child. But I'm not talking about that kind of level of disciplining or whatever. This is really, in terms of physical abuse, we're talking about children being beaten up, black and blue, end up in the hospital. And I remember this very story. Years ago, a social worker phoned me up and said, Nyasha, I need to tell you about the 6-year-old just being discharged from 6 weeks. Just being discharged from hospital. She can't go back home. And I said, well, why is that? Why can't she go back home? A 6-year-old, 6 weeks old baby. I could just imagine what could have possibly happened. And I thought she was going to tell me, oh, mom can't cope or mom, whatever. But she said, oh, this child has got every bone, including her scalp, had been broken. I had to tell her to put the phone down, phone me back later. I couldn't take the story for her to tell me, because she's got to tell me why she needs this foster family. It was just too difficult to actually read. I thought it's a good job she phoned me, because I don't think I would have been able to read it as a referral. And this is the level of abuse I'm talking about. Children suffering horrendous injuries that they end up on life support machines, end up with every bone in their thing broken, completely. And they're really the punchback of the boyfriend or the father. And they also, sometimes they get caught up in the dispute between mom and dad, where there's domestic violence. If you just happen to be nearby and mom has run away or something, the father will take it out on the child who happened to be passing by, and they end up being hit, and systematically being hit, not just, and it ends up on the arena, and the kids are so good at hiding it. They'll tell, oh, I walked in the door, you name it. They'll tell everything except that. So that's physical abuse. Then there's sexual abuse, and this happens, and it's just so incredible. At the end of all this, that adults do this to their children. Inappropriate sexual behavior, inappropriate grooming of pedophiles, offering their children to other men, and it's just so horrific. Some of the stories, when you read them, why the child is coming into care, I remember foster carer phoning me saying, Nyasha, are you making this up? and I said, why would I make up a profile of a child? That what happened? She said, I can't believe it that an adult would do that to a child. And I said, they do. It's so shocking, really. Some of it is just so shocking. And this is why there's such a high need for foster carers to look after the children. They also neglect, and again, people might say, Nyasha, neglect, whatever. I might delay changing the nappy. I might not feed my child at 12 o'clock when I said I would. You know what I mean? That's not what I'm talking. The level of neglect is really, really horrible. That the nappy cannot be changed for days, and the children are found with the most horrendous nappy rash eating into their skin. That is days and weeks and months nappy not being changed properly. And or if it's changed sort of once a day or whatever, because the parents are completely out of it. Feeding your child, literally the things we just take for granted that child needs to be fed. I remember the story of a child I fostered, and she came from a family who has an alcohol problem, and she was born with alcohol syndrome because she was damaged. That's another thing. The abuse can happen before the child is born. So that's just how the damage. It doesn't have to happen when the child is actually born. It can happen while the child is still in the womb. And there's research has been done that a child feels the mom's stress toward domestic violence when when they're still pregnant, and they're born with that nervous disposition because they were party to the family being the mother being abused. And someone has done some research about that. This is all before the child is born. So some of the damage is actually done before the child is born, and that can be done by domestic violence, the mother being extremely stressed, alcohol, drugs. We know children who are born dependent to alcohol and dependent to morphine, and that's done before. Never mind the child being, and we've looked after children who have been born dependent to heroin, and they had to be put on methadone to wean them off alcohol. So that's the kind of abuse I'm talking about. And neglect the child. I was telling you the story about when I was fostered. This girl had parents who were both alcoholic. And she said that when she was young, his older sister used to get water from the sink, dirty water, to feed her, because and put it in the bottle. And it just started level. And when they were all found, this is the level of neglect they had suffered. So this level of neglect also leads to emotional. If your parent is not available to, to give you cuddles, to encourage you, to nurture you into routines, day-to-day routines, it's all becomes also emotional, because being ignored and not having it has a long-term emotional, and the child has then developed this attachment disorders. They don't they make normal bonding, or they're too anxious. The attachment to caregivers it's all based on nervousness, because they never know what's going to happen. Mom might go off, or so they become quite, they call it a nervous anxious attachment. And so there's just so many the level of neglect and abuse is so deep and so severe. And by the time a child comes into care, you know that for the local authority to say you're going to come into care, that things are quite severe. It's not the everyday, no, we might imagine to be. So I'm always talking to the carers that you're doing the parenting as well as repairing. So you're doing two jobs really. I call it parenting plus. You've got to try and repair some of this damage the child comes to, and the behaviors and the routine, and say, in this household, no one hits anyone. In this family, no one. Everyone goes to bed at a certain time. We all get up and we go to school, and I mean, just so many things we take for granted. As a foster parent, you need to re-educate, reattach, and repair. I call it repair work. You're just repairing such a background, and it's very difficult to imagine that what repair work am I going to be doing to a baby just been born? What damage could have possibly happened to them before the end of, as I said, there's research now that damage can be done in the stomach. So there's so many different ways of neglecting, abusing children in the care, but this is the biggest, and I'm still quite sad that it remains one of the major reasons why children come in the care system. I thought by now there'll be some awareness, some education to reduce, and I'm hoping that some of the work, I mean, Banya gets the children, once all this has happened, it'll be quite interesting to look at what preventative things can be done before they get into, in terms of supporting families, so that they don't abuse their children to this level.
Wow, that's the whole awful things to hear. Just the level of abuse and the amount, like you said, 63% of the children that are coming into care are abused and neglected, and it's not just like a smack on a little smack on the wrist, or
yes.
a trip and a fall. It's actual abuse. It's violence and pretty much assault and beating.
Yeah. It's
and that's, and I mean, I personally, I understand it because it's trauma, and I grew up with Banya. I got moved into care when I was 7, and I've lived with Banya parents since I was 9 years old. And both my parents were alcoholics, and I used to watch my dad domestic violence against my mum, and it's traumatizing. And you are completely correct in what you say. Foster parents, it's not just raising a child. You have to undo and repair and try and help them heal for everything that they've been through, and it's awful. But there's this there's this perception that children come into care that are mostly because it's the child that's the issue, like they're being misbehaving and they're not listening to the parent. And there's also a perception that that children are being stolen or taken away from their parents for no good reason, and it's not true, is it?
At all. That's not the case. It's at the welfare of the child remains paramount, but local authorities do all they can for a child to remain within the family, even if it's not within the mom and dad setting. It's an extended family, grandmother, whatever, and it's really such a major decision to be made by a local authority to actually move a child from that setting. It's not really easy, and some of it, as we know, that they've got to take the parents to court. It's through legal protocols. Very few come in voluntarily, but it is a big decision, and someone has made an assessment that this is not safe.
Yeah,
it's not right for the child to be in this. So it's not anything about stealing nobody. It's not nobody's child, or
Yeah.
It's just a level of abuse. And most children remain at home with their parents.
Yeah. I mean, no, I don't think any fostering agency or any local authority wants to take a child away from their parents. It's just it's in the child's safety,
Yes,
is
for
what
the
you're
child
saying,
to be
and
safe.
it's for the safety of the child and in the best interest of the child, because you're saying that the parents are at that point are either not capable of raising the child, or um, are just in a treating the child in a negative way,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
neglecting them, abusing them, and you're saying that this all stems from like dysfunction, just a
yes,
dysfunction of the family, and
mm-hmm.
it has the domino effect,
Yes,
and it escalates
yeah.
sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's fundamental to all this problem. And the parents, if a generation of they were not parented themselves, they don't know how to parent, so it just goes on and on and on, and the history repeating itself. We've seen that a lot in the children who come in the care system.
Mm. And but you do there. You also say that um, I know it's not the majority, but there are those that come into care not because of abuse or neglect, but there are other reasons as well, aren't there?
Oh yes, we've got some other reasons, and we've got disabilities, for example, of the child, and the disability of the parents or illness of the parents. Disability of the child is when a child is so severely disabled. Again, it's got to be really severe for the local authority or the parents to say, we love our child very much, but we cannot cope. We can't provide with the level of care they need because of their own issues. It's not because they wish to abuse, or but they don't want to get to a situation where they're neglecting the child because they can't cope because of the level of disabilities. And also, if they are themselves unwell, like mental health, learning difficulties, and someone makes an assessment that they don't have the capacity to look after a baby or a child for whatever reason, which due to the disabilities, that can be reason, but it's a very small percentage in terms of if you compare it to the reasons for abuse and neglect.
Oh yes, yeah,
And
yeah. I was,
and the parents, yeah, for me, that is it's still difficult, and it still takes a long time for local authority to remove a child from that situation. But most of it is done by agreement with the parents, especially if the child is disabled.
mm,
And if they cannot look after the child long term, they will get ill again themselves because of the kind of care that's needed.
yeah,
And sometimes it could be a single mom who's given birth to and this child needs 24-hour care. Where are they going to get that level of support to look after? So they might go into a foster family where there's two people and a lot of support around so that they can look after the child. And
mm.
the parents still are in contact with that child. It's not
That would be a parent and
whether they
child
can have
placement,
contact,
wouldn't
depending on what the judges say about contact.
it? Mm,
And it's very sad about the when the parents themselves are not well or disabled. It's really very sad that children are born in that situation, and they can genuinely, with all will in the whole world, they can't. And it's about, as a foster carer, it's about understanding all that, and um, looking after the child and explaining. Because another thing, children do ask, why do I live with you instead of living with my mother? And to have to explain it's a skill to have to explain it into child language why your mom is not feeling well, your mom is disabled. What does that mean? You know what I mean? It's a very difficult. Sometimes you have to have those difficult conversation with very young people, young children asking these difficult questions, and sometimes, especially when there's been severe abuse, it's quite difficult for professionals and carers to detach themselves, from it without having to remain neutral about the level of abuse and what happened between the parent and the child.
So, yeah, like I mean, I can't imagine the difficulty. I mean, a parent or a child that with a disability or an illness, they as much as they want to, they have to realize, they have to say, I cannot do this by myself. And they don't, and I'm sure that you don't just take away the child at that point, do you? No, you encourage to support.
Yes,
Rather than,
yes, the local authorities are very good at that. And then somebody will then say, oh, this is not working. We've put this support level of support, we've done this, and it's still not working. So the best for them to come into care system.
so taking a child away from their parent is the final resort.
Recourse, really.
You try different ways to support the families, help the families,
Yeah.
before you get to that stage where a child has to be taken away.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. That's what my experience, that's what I've seen happening.
Wow. I mean, Banya's, it's a difficult job, isn't it? It's got to be a difficult job, making that decision.
And supporting the child. It's very challenging because of this background. It's more than parenting. They're not, first of all, they're not your children. They will never be your children. And then having to undo some of this damage, and you will never do. Some of the damage is permanent, no matter how much we try. And there's so all we thrive to do is to have families who are competent enough to do this piece of work and want to do and not negate, but try and address the level of abuse so that it doesn't continue, and that at the end of it, we have a functional adult who can go on and have their own children without having go through this thing again of abusing them, because they had some nurturing and some mothering or parenting within them. They take it with them, whatever experience they've had with their foster families. Because remember, this child is not always going to be a child forever. They're going to become an adult and they're going to go in the community. And that's what the work is to prepare and parent so that they can function properly. So we don't create another dysfunctional family sort of 20 years later.
Yeah, you say that, like as you said, it's some cases, if the child doesn't get the support, it can be move on generation and down generation.
Yes, yes. So
Yeah.
that's
So
our focus, really.
so these children that are taken away, that have to be taken away from their parents, why are they put into child like foster care, and why aren't they put adopted instead?
There's so many reasons why children don't get adopted. One of the main reason is their age when they come into the care system, and there's not that many adopters who are, for example, interested in adopting a 9-year-old or 10-year-old. The adopters are still looking. Their first choice will be a baby, or a toddler, the very earliest. And I think it's all this record which says the damage is done in the first 18 months of a child's life. So if you adopt, we've seen quite a few adoptions at Banya. Our carers have prepared babies and toddlers for adoption. We've seen that fail because there's so much unknown, and they were older, and some of this research which is coming out that the damage is done in the stomach. We did not know, but nobody knew that the mother might have suffered, must have even misused drugs, alcohol, suffered domestic drug, whatever. That might never come up throughout the adoption. And I think people are looking more and more into the prognosis of children coming into care system. And that alone puts people off. I don't want to end up with uh, down the line with a dysfunctional teenager because of what happened to them when they were still at home.
So, like, so you're saying that even as a toddler, if they're abused or neglected as a toddler, it may and they may not have no practical memories of it, that it can still go up later on in life.
Teenage, or when in your 40s, and suddenly remember, and people having to go through counseling or psychotherapy about things which happened, when they were when they're in their 50s. I've seen adults who the whole problem started before they got into the care system.
Wow.
And as I said, there's more and more research which is saying that, and I think that's one of the reasons why adopters doesn't come forward, and they prefer to have babies. But nowadays, even with babies, there's two things which are coming out later, which the adopters and nobody knew that had happened.
Wow.
So, whatever that was never disclosed, and most of the time it actually gets disclosed by behaviors and things which happen in latency stage when you're 9 or 8, or later on when you're a teenager, or later on when you're even an adult. It just when it shows up. And we've had a lot of we get referrals of all. I mean, the other day I was reading a profile of a child who's been adopted 8 times.
Adopted 8 times?
Yes.
Wow.
And I just think that's just so cruel. And he's gonna live with these 9 rejections. He was rejected by his birth parents or whatever. In terms of my language, he will feel it as rejection. And all these adopters have rejected him, even if it's nothing to, they're not consciously rejecting him, but for some reason they cannot continue with the adoption. And I think he's 9. So I said it's almost roughly, he's lived with a different mom and dad for 1 year since he was born.
Yeah.
And the level of that damage in terms of prognosis of that child experience is quite poor.
Yeah. So it's not even so it's not even after the straight from the birth parents. It can be from an adoptive family, or that they can get put into care because the adoptive family just they can't deal with the child, and this may stem from the child experienced at the birth family, from the birth family originally, which may not be documented because they were so young.
Yes, not documented. The parents never said. Nobody ever made a note of it.
No.
So many reasons. Lost in translation, I call it.
Yeah.
Lost in translation. And so the signs or predictions, whatever. But also, if that information had been known, maybe the child wouldn't have not have been adopted. We don't know.
That's true. That's true.
We don't know. Yeah, it's just a permutation. And some families are living in such, some of the children we come who come in the care system, especially babies, from parents who are drug addicts, whatever. They haven't even been in the system. They didn't do antenatal classes. They sort of turned up at the hospital to give birth, completely unknown. And so how do we pick up the history? What happened to this child, to this mother, and then the minute the baby is taken off, they disappeared again into the drug den, and it's not even lost in translation. There was never an opportunity to get the history, or the mother doesn't want to share because she feels that you're gonna take my child anyway.
Yeah.
I don't have any power or any recourse because of who I am. I'm not gonna tell you what happened prenatal.
And so with all these children coming into care, we have to say it's such an amazing job that the foster carers do, and
I think it's the most challenging and rewarding at the same time, very rewarding.
yeah.
And foster carers do fantastic. They're my unsung heroes, and they really do a big job and it's really opening their hearts to these children and having a go and say, I want to do this. I want to make a difference to somebody's life. Change the prognosis, change the what's going to happen by being and stop this abuse. I want to stop this abuse. I want to look after you, and your history doesn't have to repeat yourself. And opening their hearts, opening their homes, and the amount of energy it takes to look after a child, your own child, never mind on behalf of somebody else. They're really looking after the child on behalf of the community, because it's a society which has produced these children in the care system. They're not coming from Mars. These are community children, and so they're trying to readdress that. And I think it's just wonderful thing for them to do. And the need for foster carers never stops; it's still there. And we're Banya, as you know, as you started the conversation, we're always looking for foster carers.
Yeah, we are always looking for foster carers. So so we are always looking for foster carers. So if you have any desires or comments or anything into becoming a foster carer, or want to foster with Banya, just leave a message down in the comments. Don't message us directly. Give us a call or send us an email. Anything, like any type of contact, we'll try and get back to you as quickly as we can. And we'll try and get back to you as quickly as we can, because we need foster carers. The children need these carers as well. They need families to love them and care for them and help them.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for being here, Nyasha.
No problem.
It's been lovely having you.
Yes.
And it's been
Do
such a
we
lovely
have any
discussion.
comments or questions? People have any more questions for me?
I'm having a look, but I don't see any. But if they do have any comments or questions at all, I will let you know. I will forward them on to you. And yeah, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Until next time.
Until next time, next week, I believe.
Next week, thank you.
Is the next Banya Chat every Tuesday.
Thank you.